Okay, so we're going to start now. So I'm going to introduce you. Lois Letchford's dyslexia came to light at the age of 39 when she faced teaching her 7-year-old non-reading son, Nicholas. Examining her reading failure caused her to adapt and change lessons for her son. The results were dramatic. Lois qualified as a reading specialist to use her non-traditional background, multi-continental experience, and passion to assist other failing students. Her teaching and learning have equipped her with a unique skill set and perspective. As a teacher, she considers herself a literacy problem solver. Reversed, a memoir, is her first book. In this story, she details her dyslexia and the journey of her son's dramatic failure in first grade. She tells of the twists and turns that promoted her passion and her son's dramatic academic turnaround. So the way it's going to work tonight is I have a couple of questions for Lois. And what interests me is Lois and I we're both located in the Capital District, which is really quite thrilling for me. It was really great when we found each other here. And, you know, as a literacy problem solver and, you know, a reading teacher, what I said to Lois today, first and foremost, we are two parents in this world who found each other, and we had different trajectories and different outcomes, but we've had some very, very similar experiences. And before we get into some of Lois's unique ways of helping children learn to read, I wanted to talk a little bit about her story, and that's where we're going to start tonight. So my first question was about something that, you know, I feel like this month, Dyslexia Awareness Month, needs to get some attention, and that's the parents, the damage that has been done to us irrevocably as our children were hurt. And, you know, as a parent, we see our children filled with potential and dreams, and this may be a dramatic way to start off. But there's this parallel drama that starts going on with the school when people are seeing our kids very, very differently than we're seeing them. And so I'd like to start with the passage from Lois's book, Reversed. And this is Lois speaking. We could have done it as a little play, I suppose, if we had planned, but this is Lois speaking. She walks into the classroom. "How's Nicholas doing?" I ask apprehensively, breaking the silence. This is her teacher. "Oh, he is exceedingly tough for me," she says as she massages her forehead. "It's impossible," she bursts out as she leans back in the chair. "All the other children are settling in quickly and he cannot do a single thing." This is Lois. My hand curls to cover my mouth, stopping my thoughts from emerging. Mrs. Scuse's words turn to a sharp arrow, finding the exact spot between my ribs to smash into my heart. I think as parents, we've all been there. And with that said, what was it like for you in the early days of Nicholas's education?
Survival. You know, Nicholas is the middle of 3 boys. At the time he was 5, the youngest would have been 2 and not sleeping through the night. The eldest one would have been 7.5, just 7 or something like that. And it's just survival mode. And how do you cope with that? You know, if it's your only child, you might be able to focus more on them. But when you've got 3 children, as many of us do have, it's very difficult to balance it all out. And, you know, I can look at this story now from 2 points of view. One is from now, as, you know, a 60-year-old, and my son Nicholas is now 32, and from then, and then you're just surviving. Now, why didn't I take him out of school there and then? Why didn't I do something? Why did I send him to school every day to fail? Mm-hmm. You know, horrendous, really. And that's in your brain that you have to deal with. And it doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I remember, just in the early days, more just always feeling like, just being startled quite a bit, being startled that why is there a reading teacher here? What does this mean? And just you know, looking for answers. I thankfully didn't get some of the piercing comments that you had. I did by and large deal with kind people, but it wasn't the truth, and things did twist over the years, and they could twist quite badly. But I remember just being bewildered and not knowing who to trust anymore, because I had trusted the education system so much, and suddenly I realized that they didn't know the answers, and maybe they couldn't help my child. And
That trust issue is fascinating because I did trust the school.
mhm.
That's why I sent him there every day, not knowing he was shouted at, not knowing that he was isolated, not only in the classroom, but throughout lunchtime. You know, that passage there that you read is particularly bad. The one that really sticks with me is watching him going up to school one lunchtime and seeing him sit alone with the lunchbox there and a puddle of water there, as if to say, no one talked to me. And no one talked to him, no one included him in any games. And that's one section of the book that I changed from reality, because I saw that happen when he was in second grade. So it had happened for a year and a half. And that's when my heart broke.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's like our dreams are shattered, and you're right, you do look back and you think everything was okay. If we'd only known, there were so many different paths. And that's why Faith Burkowski, with her what I wish I had known, and I think so many of us are so intent on arming people with the right knowledge early on, so that they have options, or they see that it is going to be okay and there's nothing wrong with their child, and that many kids learn differently. But those early days are very isolating and lonely and shocking. And I think for all of us, very acute. And, we were talking earlier that even all these years later, you're affected by them. And I don't know, I'm getting a little bit less, I'm getting a little bit less cowardly about what I share online. What the heck, it's the internet. But I know the big change that happened to me, and I'm not proud of it, was that I never had any expectations of the schools. I reached a point where it didn't matter, and I wasn't disappointed because I had no expectations. And I have to say, we're in a pretty good place now. I mean, in a COVID environment, and I've definitely seen some really positive, I've seen some positive changes, but I operated from a place where I just felt like, I had no expectations anymore. And that's a pretty bad way to perceive the education system.
I didn't know who I could trust. I didn't know who I could turn to. We didn't have a lot of money. We were a single income family. I thought about tutoring, and I thought, Nicholas is shut down in the school all day. If I take him to a tutor after school, he's going to burn a hole in the floor. He won't listen. He won't do it. And the teacher is going to say, well, he can't do it. And I'm paying money. So then I'm going to be annoyed with my son. So you can't have that cycle either. So at that point, I didn't do anything. I actually did something that I didn't write about in the book. And that was I gave him art lessons. And that was one of the best things I did.
You took care of his happiness and his emotional health. But that's the thing, is along the way, sometimes you do reach a point where it's a balancing act, and you're kind of scared because they haven't learned to read, and you're worried about life skills, but you're more worried about keeping them whole.
Survival.
Survival.
Yes.
So this has been a lot. I'm going to segue us into a different topic, but as all of this is happening, when specifically did you start to realize that you also you and your mother and your family had experienced similar learning issues.
This is where the story gets quite interesting, because my husband's a professor, and we had study leave, or he had study leave in Oxford when Nicholas was in second grade. So our family went to England for 6 months, and I asked Nicholas if he wanted to go to school there, and the blood just dropped from his face. So I said, no, we're not going to do that. And I'd had prepared, and I'd taken a series of books to help him to learn to read, and they were a failure too. So there I am with Nicholas, facing a blank slate. What do I do? And it's as I started to explore the bookshops I was in that I started to see dyslexia, and one had about 12 or 20 lists of dyslexic things, and I'm reading through them. I'm going, oh, tie shoelaces, couldn't tie shoelaces, poor coordination, poor this, da, da, da. That's me. And I had a good benchmark because my younger sister's 2 years younger than me, and she was doing things before me. So it was really clear that there was something going wrong with me. And then as I was teaching my son Nicholas in England, Mum had visited, and she turned 70 that year. And she said, Lois, I needed help in school like you were giving Nicholas. And that's when you realise, you know, the hereditary and the effects going through all of us.
It's amazing, you know, what we learn from our kids, but it's also amazing how many adults do realize, oh my gosh, this was the reason school was such a struggle for me. This is the reason I was afraid to go down this path after school, or that I thought I was, you know, that I wasn't smart. And it's just, you know, it seems to be so common now. I think we've joked that so much of the dyslexia community is it's hereditary, and certainly you know, the adoption community is way overrepresented for various reasons too. But you know, the genetic component and the families is just, you know, it's another reason why pediatricians, or why questionnaires, you know, should be, you know, should be provided to parents of young children if they have concerns about, you know, their children's development, or even as just part of the, you know, part of the early screenings. It's just so prevalent.
Nicholas had 2 strikes against him. One was the hereditary. The second was that he had ear infections from 8 to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that is disastrous for language and for the brain. And the brain, if it's not using the neurons, they start to drop off. Mm-hmm. So, you know, he's not hearing the language, yeah, which is why he ends up being, you know, when we get an assessment that's valid, it's speech language impaired.
Right, right.
You know, really severe, really severe. So,
well,
anyway.
But everything must have made sense for you when you suddenly realized, well, that was me.
Yes. I was nowhere near as bad as Nicholas. If I was as bad as Nicholas, I mean, even today, you know, Nicholas would have really struggled without the extreme privilege, because they pigeonhole children, and they pigeonhole the remediation of those children, rather than saying, what else do I have to do? Mm-hmm. You know, and that it's very interesting to see the journey that Nicholas took was really quite extraordinary. And I mean, I'm just so thankful for it, because I was allowed to have his strengths shine, as well as teaching him to read. And normally you don't get that combination.
Right, right. Well, that's the next question is, as you began to figure out how to teach Nicholas to read, what surprised you the most as you were just figuring out your own strategies?
Well, you know, I did this program Successful, and it was a disaster. And I started to get annoyed at Nicholas, which is what you do. You're not working hard enough. You're not trying hard. You blame the child. And my mother-in-law was with me, and she said, Lois, put away what's not working and make learning fun. And that caused me to say, what else can I do? And the only thing I could come up with nothing, you know, no books, no, was write poems. And the moment I wrote that first poem, there was a dramatic transformation. He relaxed. We laughed. My stress levels are still high, but that relaxation was huge. And as the poetry got better and better and better, it was Nicholas's enthusiasm for learning that rocked me. And my mind's thinking, what other poem can I write? What else can I do? And he's off in this little world of exploration and looking at maps and doing things that I had never, never, never expected him to do. And then you start to see his brain asking questions I can't answer. And, because we're in England, I mean, this is where we were so privileged. We could have been anywhere in the world, but we're in England. And he's asking about maps. Well, you've got the British Library in London, and you've got the Bodleian Library in Oxford. And you go there and everything's in front of you. There's maps everywhere. And Nicholas's strength is in visual spatial awareness. I didn't know I'd tapped into this extreme strength that he has. And we would look at these things, and I'd look at my 7-year-old and really just be rocked at the depth of concentration and the interest in everything that we were doing. If I'd thought about it, you would have known then he's capable of doing anything. I didn't know that. I just knew he didn't have a low IQ. But it was phenomenal working with him. And what happened was I became so excited by teaching, and he became so excited by learning.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because, you had tapped into something accidentally that just cracked it open for him, and to witness somebody come alive, someone who hasn't had any joy in learning, minus getting, having laughter and having some fun with your poetry, but suddenly somebody sees something that is just, that he just wants to learn more and more about, and he understands, and you happen to be located in a place that has some of the best maps in the world. And, I can see where you would think, what did I uncover, and how can I continue to motivate this child so that he has this level of excitement, but he's still, he still needs to read. And I know you figured all those pieces out. You figured out he's got to learn to pronounce the sounds and crack the code and the language piece, and that these are ways I can make it fun. But the way that you came to it, just this kind of organic discovery of, oh my God, look at what my son can understand. Look at my son's enthusiasm and excitement. And these are not graphics, maps that everybody quite gets, but my son is getting them, and he wants to follow them and have adventures related to them. And yeah, I mean, it must have been a life-changing moment watching it. It was.
That's that 6 months. In fact, it ended up being 4 months. Changed my life. And then only one person spoke to me when I was in Oxford, because the youngest one went to kindergarten, and she said, I've got this book for you, and it was Hear It, See It, Say It, for teaching decoding. And it taught me to turn over every stone.
Yes.
Because it dealt with, the digraphs, the TH, SH, and CH, with short vowel only. And the next one was consonant blends. And then the triple blends. But that's one component.
Yes.
What I talked to Nicholas, I said, tell me what you remember about learning to read. Well, he couldn't even talk about first grade. But then in second, he said, I remember Oxford, he said, and I remember the maps. Of course I remember the maps. And he said, and I remember you wrote a funny poem. And he's giggling, age 30. He's giggling about a poem I wrote when he was 7. And he said, I wrote the ingredients to a witch's spell. I mean, and it's this sort of learning that just rocks me, that was not just learning for the moment, but there's a love of learning and an engagement that was unbelievable.
Well, that leads me to my next question, which as we get into your reading work, but in your current work, what are some approaches that you do differently before helping a child to read? And tell specifically the story about the 16-year-old you started working with.
A mother called me up in August. She has read my book and she said, Lois, they're telling me he has a low IQ. He can't read anything. Okay. And I say, look, I suggested to her, I said, I wonder if he can wonder what sentence he'd give me if I asked him to give me a sentence with the word TO or FOR. And so I decided to work with him, well, let's just see what happens. See if the school is right. See if he does have a low IQ or see if there's something else going on. I asked him, the first thing I did was have a conversation. So I built a rapport with them about something that he liked. And as we're talking via Zoom, I'm writing down everything we say. And then I send it to him and say, now would you like to read that? And the mother and the son went, panic, immediate panic. I said, wrong question. Don't do that. You've printed it out. Circle every word you know. The change in direction's instant because you're not asking to read anything. You're breaking the process down to reading first before you deal with comprehension. So you can read every single word. And then as he's going through, of course, every word is circled. The panic has gone. Oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. And then I said, and then now write the word TO. And this was the sentence he gave me for TO. I have 2 of the same lizards. For FOR, he said, I have 4 grey shark's teeth. This child is 16 years old. He's in his 9th grade, so he spent 9 years in school, or 8 or 9 years in school, and speech therapy every year. No one has taught him this difference. When the foundations of learning to read are poor, you're building stuff, it can't grow. It's like a building. The foundations have got to be strong. You've got to understand the difference between TO and TWO. That's where I start. And then go on from there. So you're building foundations every time certainly with reading is meaningful, because what we forget when children read is that they often read words and do not comprehend. Why am I so familiar with that? Because that was me.
Yes. And so was he decoding the words, but he just couldn't understand them, or he had weaknesses in all the areas?
He had weaknesses in all the areas. Okay. Because when you cannot read for meaning, if you think of I'm going to school or I go to school and you say I go, and then you've got a picture of to school, what's happening in that sentence?
Yeah.
The picture that's being created in the mind is non-existent, is it? Mm-hmm. Are there 2 schools? Are there 2 of me? So we've lost them.
Wow.
So that's why, and I do things. I physically get them to act out. Go to the kitchen and get a glass of water. Go to your bedroom and and I'm pointing all the time. Go to, because that's what to means. It's an arrow, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And so we have a picture and with a symbol above it within the sentence. And we're creating a picture with the whole sentence, with individual words and then with the whole sentence.
So you're going back with the vocabulary from the get-go.
And then the other thing you're dealing with, past tense, present tense. Why have we used the word have and not had? Mm-hmm. There's a reason why we say have. Mm-hmm. I have or I am, or I was or I were, or we were rather. And so he was missing vital areas of foundational work that have to be in place before the decoding and everything else makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and are you still working with him or? Mm-hmm.
He's
Yes.
He's actually doing incredibly well, and I take my hat off to the mother who has worked so hard with him. I have him listen to books on CD before we read them, so we have to build all the language. You know, and along with doing that foundational stuff, because we're dealing with the 16-year-old, I want them to be like Nicholas. I want them to know the excitement of learning.
Yes.
So I select a book that I love, which I know they will love. And my favourite is Aliens Ate My Homework, because it's got a combination of low-level language. We've got the kid in the story gives low-level language. The main character in the story gives this high-level language, really high-level language. And it blows your mind what children remember. And then, see, we cannot forget, learning to read is about memory. What words do you remember? What don't you remember? And it's like learning a foreign language.
Yes.
And if you listen to Nicholas, he will say learning to read was like learning a foreign language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, it all becomes important. And it's, you know, 50% of children learn irrespective of what you do. 80% of children will learn if you provide more structured phonics and this and, you know, do more things. When you get down to my son, Nicholas,
Mm-hmm.
and the children that I have specialised in teaching, you can't get one or two things right. You have to get everything right. And I leave no stone unturned to make sure they read, decode, and comprehend at a level that you're not even aware of.
Well, that's what the last question I have is I mean, you have, I think that one of the unique qualities about you is your passion to connect with these kids and to bring joy to these kids. So what are some of the unique strategies that helped you to break through to some of these children that really were not progressing until you worked with them?
Believe it or not, the first thing is they must connect with the literature. It took me a while to work this out. I think a book's funny. Ah, yes, that book's really funny. It's about a white kid, you know, in a white family with a cat. I'm teaching black boys, are there? It's not funny to them.
Mm-hmm.
Put it away. Throw it out. You've got to have a story that they can say, I could be here. Yeah, this is me. And use their words in the story. So I do a lot of taking a story and adapting it to a play. Plays are phenomenal because you only have to read one line. Mm-hmm. And someone else is reading the next, so it becomes a dialogue. So that makes it easier. But it's about connections. And Stephanie Harvey says in reading is thinking. It's about making connections with the characters. And we forget very early on in the early literacy books, they are often white, they're female, and they're middle class. And we're teaching black boys and wondering why they are not connecting with that material. They don't see themselves there. I grew up with Dick and Jane. Do you know the Dick and Jane series?
Yes, I do.
If someone had asked me where those people were from, the only place I could have said, they must be from the stars. Because in southeast Queensland where I live, you can see the stars. You know where they are. They're in the sky. And they're millions of miles away. You know they're a long way away. But who are these people who wear clothes like that? They would think, what do they do with that hair? They're always immaculate. My mother and father worked in a dairy, morning and night. You know, you can imagine my mother going.
It's true. I mean, having, you know, you being cognizant of the literature that you choose. And matter of fact, last week I had Trey Hadrick on, who is a children's author, and he also has this little animated character, Mr. Lit. And, you know, he's, you know, his focus is also to reach children of color and especially young, you know, African-American boys. And, you know, he wants kids to see kids that look and act like themselves. And it's true, when you're starting to read and you want to be engaged in literature, there has to be something that you can relate to. And
Yeah.
you know, we do need to be more cognizant of that, for sure. And you know, I see it I see it all the time. I mean, you know, as you know, my daughter's Latina. So when she was very little, you know, we were always trying to get her, she had these little twin dolls that looked like her, those American dolls that she wasn't interested in anyway, but we had them briefly. And it does make you aware of how different it is, for other communities. I mean, you know, I even Trey and I try not to go down, you know, we'll meander into race, but to focus it to literature, to your point, that's absolutely true. If the story has no meaning, it's not you, then why should you care?
My greatest challenges, other than Nicholas, were my 15-year-old boys from Lubbock. One was black, one was Hispanic. And the black boy, and they came to me with no words. They were very similar to my 16-year-old now. And the black boy was really, you know, and he played football and all the rest of it. But once I had a story where he could see himself in it, I had that kid. You know, and you never let them go. And then, you know, realize, and what happened with that story was he was reading through it, and it was doing really well. And he came to a part, the story was written in Australia, Australian author. And he read it and he looked and he said, "We wouldn't say those words." And he was angry. And I go, "Oh, we can change it." Oh, and then
He's affected. Yes.
out there. This is mine.
Yes.
Yeah, these are my words. And then, you know, they're so proud of not only reading it, but saying it and changing it and adapting it. It's theirs. You know, we all come with a backpack and we're not aware that we come with a backpack. It sits under our skin and it's all our experiences. It's all of our culture and all of our beliefs that we just accept that everyone's like us, but they're not. So,
Well, that's true. That is true. And we've actually, would you believe we've been talking for 35 minutes? I know. And, you know, I thought that was I thought it was, for some reason, everybody seems to say like a profound sentence at the end that I think this is a perfect way to, you know, like segue into the end, because it's true. We think everybody's like us, and they're not. And that's really, you know, I think for the conversation that, you know, we've just had tonight, I think that's kind of a wise conclusion to the many topics that we covered. But I do want to encourage anybody who's watching to read your book, because it really is, it's the same story that if there's, I'm sure it's mostly parents watching us tonight. I hope there's other people besides parents, because we want to create awareness this month, but it's all of our story, but it's also the specifics of, as you said, we're not all alike, your story and the 3 continents you lived on, and your journey from studying physical education all the way to going to SUNY Albany and getting your master's in literacy education. So, you know, it's a great story, and I'm very proud that you're my friend and that we've met, because it was a brave story. It takes a lot of bravery to share, you know, your journey with people, and other people should be reading this. And, you know, you're making it, you're helping other children with literacy, and you've taken a really tough experience and your trajectory is positive. Look at what you've done. And so, you know, I want to thank you for our discussion, and whoever's watching, and tomorrow, and you know, maybe hold up your book one more time, because mine is flipped over here.
Definitely. And Marion, I had to learn to write.
Yes, we could have discussed writing and
Oh,
spelling and all of the other important areas that reading doesn't do much good without.
yeah, yeah.
That'll be next time.
Next time. Well, I thank you. You're right. I'm delighted we have met and that we are so close by. And one day we'll be able to meet up again more often.
Yes, we will at the tea house where we first met. So
Yes. Yeah.
good night, everybody. Thank you. And tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we have early literacy for school librarians, our first program specific for school librarians. I'm really excited. Please share it and try to catch it tomorrow at 4.